Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Lauren Izo. And coming up in this edition, police hand out fines as politicians mull lifting Israel out of its second lockdown if cases continue to decline. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas holds an unexpected meeting over the weekend with the World Jewish Congress President Ronald Lauder in the West Bank. But why? And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's sick of being stuck indoors during the global pandemic. We'll show you a creative way to get outside. Israelis are becoming exhausted from being locked down and becoming reckless over what they believe are unhelpful government policies. With that said, it looks like Israel could be on the way out of its second lockdown if the infection rate continues to decline, as it slowly has been. Nittany Manson reports.
The country is preparing to take its first steps towards exiting the nationwide lockdown as early as this week. The coronavirus cabinet will meet on Tuesday, and the health ministry saying restrictions could be lifted as early as Wednesday. However, it was likely that nothing would change until next week.
ביום שלישי למה שמכונה קבינט הקורונה את המתווה ליציאה מן הסגר.
The holiday of Simchat Torah ending with the police handing out 7,523 tickets to violators, both religious and secular, who broke lockdown restrictions. Dramatic scenes played out, including in Tel Aviv, where onlookers tried to intervene as a young woman was arrested on the beach. Some 825 patients were deemed in serious condition Saturday night, including 214 who were intubated. The death toll is at 1,941. But some 14 red towns with high coronavirus infection rates will remain under lockdown, including Bnei Brak, Ramle, Ashdod, Rehovot, Lod, and Hedera, and more, and a few neighborhoods in Beit Shemesh, Jerusalem, and Netanya.
אני קובע חד משמעית. מי שיוצא כרגע עם הקריאות לפתוח את הכל מהר במשק הישראלי, הורס את כלכלת ישראל, הורס פשוט את החיים של בני אדם, של המובטלים, של בעלי עסקים, של כל מי שכבר סבל מספיק.
The health ministry has drawn up an 8-stage plan to begin next week and end in February, with each stage lasting for around 2 weeks, assuming that COVID-19 rates continue to decline.
כל השאר תלוי בכל אחד מאיתנו. אם לא נסתכל על האחרים, נסתכל קודם כל במראה, וכל אחד וכל אחת יגיד מה אני עוד יכול לעשות על מנת שהאנשים הנפלאים האלה, הרופאים, הרופאות, האחים, האחיות, כוח העזר, מקצועות הפרה, יוכלו פעם אחת לקחת יום חופש וטיפה לנשום. אם זה יהיה קו המחשבה של כולנו, אנחנו נוכל להתקדם במאבק בנגיף ובסופו של דבר גם לנצח אותו.
Meanwhile, a 30-second coronavirus test is being developed by India and Israel and should be ready in a matter of days. Nittany Manson, ILTV.
Well, in the background of all that, thousands of Israelis protested across the country over the weekend, disregarding a new law meant to curb anti-government demonstrations during the COVID-19 lockdown. The new law bans Israelis from holding demonstrations more than 1 kilometer from their homes and forces stricter social distancing, a measure the government said was aimed at curbing virus infections. Critics have called it a blow to democracy and freedom of speech.
I'm here protesting again as a young person in Israel who is feeling that he has no future, and he feels that Israel is becoming a dictatorship under the leadership of the Prime Minister of Netanyahu, who is accused in criminal acts.
Ben Dror Yamini is an Israeli journalist and author, and Uri Zaki is the founder of the Front for the Protection of Democracy and chairman of the Merit's Executive Board. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. Now, Ben Dror, I want to start with you. The country looks like it's slowly coming out of its second wave, and the lockdown might be lifting as early as this week. Yet the left-wing protesters, as well as the ultra-Orthodox, continue to defy the orders. Will lifting the lockdown calm the political climate at the moment in Israel?
Yeah, unfortunately, many decisions are accepted only because of political reasons, not because of the experts in health or whatever. And what we see right now, yes, the two sides, which mean ultra-Orthodox Haredim and many among the demonstrators, are violating the rules. I mean, they don't keep distance, many of them, and each one of us who is just passing by in many places, we can all see that many people just do not put the masks as they're asked. And yesterday I joined the demonstration in Tel Aviv. It was a big one, thousands were marching. And many of them do not keep, needless to say, that they do not keep distance. So both sides are making things difficult. And even if we are on our way to maybe to solve the problem, I'm afraid that because so many people from both sides are not keeping the rules, it's going to be very limited, the relief.
Right, and even at those protests without people that are attending them wearing masks, there are a lot of critics against the government's policies that say, you know, this is not good for our democracy. Uri, the next question's for you. What do you have to say to those politicians that try to limit the protests? Is it helping or hurting the situation?
First of all, Lauren, I resent your question to Ben-Dror. You put an equivalent between the demonstrations that changed altogether the way they demonstrate. They follow the rules of the government. The government said you have to demonstrate only 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer, half a mile from where you reside. And to do it in smaller groups. You know, before those rules, you had a huge demonstration of tens of thousands in front of the Prime Minister's residence. So there is an acceptance by the demonstrators of the government's rules. There are always exceptions, but they are minor. Well, with regard to the Haredi Jews, we are seeing, by the way, both here and in New York at the moment, we see just a real anarchy. We see that there is a decision not to follow the government's rules. And by the way, if the demonstrations would have been a health care problem, then we would have seen an eruption in Tel Aviv, in Ramat HaSharon, in Givatayim, all these cities from which the demonstrators come. We don't see that. What we do see is 40% of the cases of new COVID-19 cases come from the Haredi section, which is only 1/10% of the Israeli population. So stop with the demagoguery. There is no equivalent between the demonstrations, which are very important in a time of crisis where you see no management, to a specific section. And again, not all of it. There are exceptions there. But you see the Haredi sector in Israel at large. You see there's no acceptance of the government's guidance, and they say it out loud. So I don't see any equivalent. With regard to politicians, the biggest problem, and I think only now Netanyahu understands that, what's inherent in your question is exactly what Netanyahu achieved, but it's biting him in a sensitive spot in the body. And the reason is we see that Netanyahu is occupied with the demonstrations and letting what's happening in the Haredi section, the ultra-Orthodox section, just continue happening. But what's happening in the reality is we see that the eruption is so severe in the Haredi sector, and there's nothing in the rest of the country. But he can't, because he's indicted, because he's facing a criminal trial, he has to have the political weight of the Haredi politicians, and he can't defy what they're telling him. And they're telling him, no way are you going to isolate us from the rest of the country. No way there's going to be a difference between the Haredi towns and cities to the rest of the country. And that's why Netanyahu cannot go on being the Prime Minister of Israel in a time of crisis.
So, Uri, what do you think is a sort of better way for the government to approach this? Do you think that they shouldn't put any restrictions at all? I'm curious. What is your opinion on that?
Of course, there have to be restrictions. And by the way, I publicly said that I support the lockdown. We came to a situation where, because of negligence of the Prime Minister, because of his own political and criminal and legal situation, he did not deal with the coronavirus eruption in specific towns, we came to a situation where we had to have a lockdown, a national lockdown. But now, in order to get out of the lockdown, you need to have only healthcare guidelines in order to change the situation. Now, I don't see Netanyahu able doing that because of his situation, and therefore, regardless if you think he's guilty or not guilty, it's out of the point right now. A person that is totally dependent on his political allies in order to save his neck from going to jail cannot run a national crisis of this magnitude.
I want to pose the next question to Ben Dror. Obviously, we just mentioned that Bibi is going through, a corruption trial right now. And we also might be going to an election. So I wonder, what is going to happen in the Israeli political sphere? And will Benny Gantz ever get to be the prime minister? Or will Netanyahu put a stop to that?
It's the million-dollar question. I wish I could answer you, but I cannot. I'm not a prophet. I do know, and we all know actually, that that Netanyahu, as long as he doesn't want to ratify in the Knesset the budget, the meaning is that he doesn't mean to fulfill his part in the coalition agreement. So. We have only a few weeks in order to understand what's going on. But no, he doesn't want to let Benny Gantz take his seat. So probably if there will not be any surprise, it will not happen, which means that we might face a new election unless somebody will be able to form a new coalition, something which I cannot foresee, I must admit. So it's not good. It's not good for the country. I'm not sure it's good for Benjamin Netanyahu. Maybe he is really impressed from the polls, which give the right-wing religious bloc more than 60 seats in the Knesset. I don't know if he can trust it. I don't know if he cannot. Situation is not good. And unfortunately, he is not behaving according to the national interest. He is behaving according to his own personal interests.
I just want to ask.
I hope something will change, but I'm not quite optimistic.
All right, we are running out of time. I just want to ask Uri really, really quickly. I want to know if you believe if Netanyahu is hearing what the protest movement is telling him.
Look, I don't think Netanyahu is not about hearing the people, but he sees the polls. He sees national polls. He sees that he's declining very fast from support at the beginning of the crisis, and now he lost some 30% of his support. I think he understands he's in a big problem because folks understand, even his supporters, the current ones and former ones, understand, as we just heard Ben Dror say, that because of his own personal problems, he doesn't deal with the national interest, but rather he makes the calculations of what's helping him in the trial. And therefore, I think you'll hear less from Netanyahu in the coming days about the demonstrations, because he understands that focusing too much on the demonstrations cost him with lost votes, not votes that necessarily support the demonstrations, but saw his disproportionate dealing with them.
All right.
So I think you'll hear less of that.
Thank you so much. Uri Zaki and Ben Dror Yamini, thank you both for being a part of this colorful conversation.
Thank you.
Moving now to a completely different type of chaos. Some 5,000 people were forced to evacuate their houses over the weekend as dozens of wildfires broke out across the country. Although most residents were allowed to return home by Saturday morning, an investigation was opened to learn the cause of that fire. While most fires are believed to have been the result of extreme heat, security officials have raised concerns that some blazes in the West Bank were the result of arson. Dozens of houses throughout the country suffered damage, and dozens of people needed treatment for smoke inhalation. Among them were at least 10 firefighters. IDF soldiers were called in to help contain some of the fires and to assist evacuating people from threatened residential areas. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will immediately bring over some 2,000 Ethiopian Jews.
ביום שני הקרוב אני אביא לישיבת הממשלה הצעת החלטה להעלות 2,000 מבני עמנו באתיופיה, בדרך להביא את כל השאר. אנחנו גם ימנו 80 מיליון שקל לפעילות בקהילה.
There are around 13,000 Ethiopian Jews in the capital of the country, Addis Ababa, and in Gondar, most of them waiting to be taken to Israel, which they consider to be their home. Most live in dire conditions, and many say they have family members who have already settled in Israel.
אני מודה לך בשם הקהילה על המשך העלייה שאתה עושה. למרות הקריאות הגזעניות שאנחנו שומעים, והנה התשובה, המענה הטוב ביותר, זה המשך העלייה של יהודי אתיופיה.
Moving on now, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas holding an unexpected meeting over the weekend with World Jewish Congress President Ronald Lauder in the West Bank. According to a Palestinian source, Lauder was hoping to revive peace talks with Israel, between Israel and the Palestinians. He told a Saudi newspaper on September 16th that he hoped the recent peace deal with the UAE and Bahrain would bring the Palestinians and Israel back to peace talks, which collapsed back in 2014. In Washington, a person familiar with the matter said Lauder's visit was not coordinated with or on behalf of the Trump administration, but was in a strictly private capacity. The White House did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Well, speaking of nature, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's sick of being stuck indoors during the global pandemic. One of the things I miss most is going hiking and generally being in nature. Well, if you are in the same boat as me, there's a way for you to now experience the outdoors virtually. Dr. Moti Charter is a senior lecturer, wildlife ecologist at the Shamir Research Institute at the University of Haifa. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So you have developed a unique project. You've placed live cameras in popular nature spots. Tell me exactly how does that work and how did you come up with the idea?
So the idea is very simple. I research animals and birds. So we get to see beautiful, amazing things that not everybody gets to see. And the idea is to bring the nature to the people. Obviously now with the coronavirus, it's super relevant and people, are not able to go outside. But even in days that aren't the coronavirus, we want people to see the nature but not disturb it. So what we did was we created a channel on YouTube. You can go online at Charter Group Israel. You type in a search and you reach the YouTube channel. And you can see all different beautiful, amazing things. For example, like this vulture nest of the Israel Nature Parks Authority. You can watch vultures breeding live. Or 30 vultures landing on a carcass, things that you're probably used to seeing in National Geographic. But in Israel, we have amazing nature here. Also, right now, we have, or these wild boars, we have a migration here. So about 30 to 45,000 great white pelicans migrate through Israel. It's a bird that's wingspan about almost up to, there you go right there, 11 feet. About the height of a person. Each one eats between 1 to 3 pounds of fish a day. And people are be able to watch the migration live, even during this period of coronavirus. This here is in the Hula Nature Reserve of the Israel Nature Parks Authority. So we're able to see all these amazing things going on. It helps us with our research. It helps us with our research and in our monitoring on the one hand, but on the other hand, we're able to bring people to the nature, even during these very difficult times.
Right, and it's really amazing footage, I have to admit. I spent a long time just watching these live feeds when I was doing research for the story. And I wonder, how does this work logistically? How much money went into this and who's funding it exactly?
So believe it or not, I have a private donor and it's 100% all the equipment comes from the private donor. Other than that, my research group, we're actually working for free, kind of volunteering. I don't have really funds to do most of the work. But it's logistically, it's a huge project. But because we really want to bring the nature to the people, we feel that it's worth the time and the effort, in particular with these very difficult times with the coronavirus. So we set up the cameras. Everything's done with the Israel Nature and Parks Authority, that we make sure not to disturb the nature, obviously. We put the camera up, then everything's done remotely. We don't actually have to return to these sites. For example, with these wild boar in the Hula Nature Reserve, this is an area where people do not go. You can't go there. It's 100% cut off from humans. But now people can actually be able to see in their homes or on their phones all this wildlife, which is just truly amazing thing. We're very proud of this. And we're going to continue. Now is the winter time, so we'll see many migrating birds. But in the springtime, we'll add in many nests of birds, kestrels, barn owls, many other birds. So the idea is just bringing people, connecting people to nature and seeing things that us as researchers we see all the time, but other people do not.
So you said that the cameras were actually set up before the COVID-19 pandemic, correct?
We started the channel in February. Since then, we've added about cameras in 20 different locations, and we keep on moving them according to the season. So, for example, if there was in a nest of a barn owl, the breeding season ended, so we moved it to another location. And we're going to continue to add more and more cameras as we go along. And because it's become a huge hit, currently we have about 50,000 people that are watching this over the last month. And it's not only in Israel, it's throughout the world.
Wow.
In countries, obviously, US and Europe, the UK, even in Japan, in Africa.
Wow.
So it's turned into a global thing that people can enjoy and see a different side of Israel. Unfortunately, as you know, in Israel, we get a little bit bad press, not from you guys, obviously. But here it's a case where people can see the beautiful wildlife of Israel, and it's all positive, and we're very happy about that.
And I'm curious, did you have as large a following before we were so far into this lockdown? Has it grown as a result of Corona, of people wanting to be reconnected to nature?
So without a doubt, people have a lot more times on their hands now. And people continuously thank us that they're able to sit in their living rooms or on their computers and be able to see the wildlife. So the numbers have jumped drastically. And some days we have 3,000 people. It's quite amazing,
Wow.
and just varies during different hours of the day. But without a doubt, the number of viewers have increased drastically.
So I bet you yourself have spent a lot of hours watching this footage. What's sort of the most interesting, cool thing that you got to capture during this live stream?
So about an hour ago in the Hula Nature Reserve, there was a white-tailed eagle, which is a critically endangered bird. I think there's only one breeding pair in Israel, and that happened to be one of the adults. And I got to see him fly and chase after some pelicans and birds, which is something unbelievable even for me to see.
Amazing stuff, Dr. Charter. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure, all's mine.
Well, while everyone is stuck at home, people are spending lots of time with their pets. One girl in southern Israel has a pet you might not expect, a python. Take a look.
8-year-old Imbar likes to cool off in her small backyard pool in Israel with her favorite swimming buddy, her pet python. The 11-foot yellow serpent named Belle is one of her family's many pets living happily together on an animal sanctuary in an agricultural community in southern Israel. She was named after Belle, the female character in Walt Disney's popular animated film Beauty and the Beast, who dons a yellow ball gown in a famous dance scene in the movie.
יולדת להעביר את הזמן כי אני אוהבת מאוד להיות עם נחשים, ולפעמים אני יודעת לנחשים גם להשיל והכל, ואני יודעת להיות שמחים בקורונה.
Inbal said Belle is good company during coronavirus lockdowns that have kept schools closed over the past few weeks. Sarit Regev, Inbal's mother, said the two grew up together.
I see it very natural because Inbal raised with all these animals, and she's raised with the snakes. When Inbar was little, she swam inside the bath with the snake, and now she's grown up, and the snake got bigger, so they swim together in the pool. It's very natural for us.
And there's no denying that having companionship during this time is positive, no matter what shape or size, even if it has scales.
Okay, on that note, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be 71 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow we'll have clear skies at 84 Fahrenheit or 29 degrees Celsius. And now, just before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. All right, we know this section is normally called tubing, but today we thought we'd give you a surfing segment. Every day you can check on YouTube for Israel's surf report, and every day there is a video posted of all the people during COVID-19 trying to hang 10 on the beach and get all their surfing needs out. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.38 shekels to the American dollar and 2.57 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Lauren Izzo. Thanks for watching.